Hello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome one and all, and thank you for being here. Tonight, I think you're going to hear some very great news in the area of education, and also some very great news for any of our soldiers suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, Operation Warrior Wellness. Now this microphone is going to get turned over to Bobby Roth. Bobby is the vice president of the David Lynch Foundation and pretty much works 24/7 to help people all over the world. Please welcome the great Bobby Roth.
Thank you very much, David. And on behalf of the David Lynch Foundation, it's wonderful to welcome you all here tonight. It's been said that Americans are swimming in an ocean of stress. And if that's the case, our children are drowning in it, our veterans are drowning in it, American Indians living on impoverished reservations are drowning in it. So many at-risk people in this country are drowning in stress. But it's not just stress anymore. It's traumatic stress, far deeper, far more insidious. And that is a reminder for cell phones. Not as stressful as that, but please turn off your cell phone. I cued the cell phone there so that, otherwise it would have been a little obtrusive if I would have said something. But traumatic stress. And for those fortunate children and those fortunate individuals who have access to medication and have access to talk therapy, there is some help. But for millions and millions and millions of people who go untreated, unhealed, and even those who have medication and talk therapy, it's some help. 10 million children in America on antidepressant medication under the age of 12. 5 million children diagnosed with ADHD, and the number 3 cause of death among teenagers in this country, suicide. We have a very serious problem. And tonight, in a very enjoyable way, we're going to look at a very substantive solution. And we're going to investigate the power of meditation. You've all heard that. But specifically, we're going to investigate the power of a technique called Transcendental Meditation, a technique that David Lynch has been practicing for almost 40 years, and as he likes to say, has never missed a meditation in those years. A technique that has an enormous amount of research. And we're going to look at it, as David said, in 2 main areas: schools and also our veterans. And to start, our first speaker is a great psychiatrist, world-renowned psychiatrist, and a researcher at the National Institutes of Mental Health for 20 years. And he was the first to describe what's called seasonal affective disorder, SAD. And his new book, and you're all getting a copy of it, called Transcendence, Healing and Transformation Through Transcendental Meditation, just found out that in the June 19th edition of the New York Times is number 7 on the New York Times bestseller list. Dr. Rosenthal practices here in Bethesda. So really, without further ado, I'd like to ask Norman, hope you don't mind, Norman, that you come and tell us about the meditation, about your journey, how you wrote this book. Please welcome Dr. Norman Rosenthal.
Good evening, everybody. I must tell you, it's a little bit surprising for me to be here talking to you all about meditation. About 5 years ago, I would never have predicted or anticipated that I would be doing so. Because for many years, I have practiced psychiatry, I have researched, and haven't really given much thought to meditation at all. Now, I'm always very interested in what my patients tell me. I listen, I'm really fascinated. It's one of my great joys is I love my work. But every now and then, somebody says something that just fires my researcher's imagination. And I think to myself, I really have to find out more about this. And that happened to me some years ago when I was back at the NIMH. And somebody told me about regular mood changes that occurred with the seasons, when the days got short and dark. And the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle came together, and along with our team there, some of whom are even here this evening, we put together the puzzle of seasonal affective disorder and the novel treatment of light therapy, which at that time, I can tell you, people thought was pretty wacky, but which has since become a mainstream treatment. Now, a similar thing happened to me about 5 or 6 years ago when a young man with bipolar disorder, whom I was treating, began to talk with me about transcendental meditation. Now, of course, we all know bipolar disorder is a serious condition, and it requires medications and various standard treatments. But what this young man said to me was, along with everything you're giving me, there's something else that I have added to the mix that is making me really happy 90% of the time, and that is transcendental meditation. And I quizzed him about that. And I said, I did that way back in South Africa when the Beatles went to visit Maharishi. And then I just abandoned it. He said, you should get back to meditating, Dr. Rosenthal. So I listened, he said it again, and I was thinking, where am I going to fit 20 minutes twice a day into my schedule? But that was one of those moments where I thought, wow, he says it's really helped him, he says it stabilized him. What have I got to lose? Let me give it a shot. So my good friend Bob Roth happened to be in town, and he refreshed my technique. Once you've got that mantra, then it's with you forever, and taught me how to use it properly. And I wish I could say that there was a sudden epiphany, but there wasn't. But I kept at it, prompted by my patient who kept saying, now, you're doing it regularly. You've got to do it regularly. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So I started to do it regularly. And then gradually, something very interesting began to happen in my head. I got calmer and less reactive. The ordinary irritations and the frustrations, the disappointments of everyday life that would rattle me. Now, I still don't like them, believe me, but instead of the reflexive reaction, I just began to have a more thoughtful response. A simple example is somebody cuts you off in the traffic. And I've seen people cussing, and I used to be one of those people. But really, I'm much more likely to say, maybe he's in a hurry, maybe he has an emergency, maybe he has a problem. But why should I let it become my problem? And it's coming from a very authentic place. It's not a cognitive therapy thing that as soon as I feel angry, I say, well, no, wait a sec, now you're feeling angry, and you've got a bad thought, and you've got to fix that, and you've got to have a good thought instead. It's just coming kind of very organically from within, and that was really interesting. And I've been a fairly organized person, but I became more so, better at setting priorities, better at getting things done. So, I've always kind of used myself as a bit of a laboratory for my patients, and I thought, it's really helping me. Maybe I should recommend it to this person with an anxiety problem, or that person with an alcohol problem, or whatever. And I'm finding that it's beginning to help people. They're coming back to me, they're saying it's really helping. Some, of course, more than others. One very dramatic case, a woman whose husband had a really terrible anger problem, and they had tried absolutely everything with very little benefit. Woman is a therapist herself, and it just didn't help, and it was very unhappy. He was really a nice guy, and nothing had helped, and I thought, what's to lose here? So I explain the story. And recently I had occasion to ask her, and she said, you know, it's an absolute game changer. She said, after everything we went through, I just can't believe that this technique has made that much difference. Now, of course, you know, we all know nothing is a panacea. But even if some people are getting this degree of benefit, then surely it's something we need to be exploring. And indeed, the next thing was that I did do some research on it in post-traumatic stress disorder in veterans who had been in combat. You're going to hear more about that later. But last week, we had a paper published in Military Medicine on 5 veterans who had done TM for their combat-related PTSD, you know, with really good effects. At a basic level, it's kind of intriguing that they were able to actually sit there and do the technique, that it was feasible. But much more than that, within 2 months, they had a 50% decrease in their PTSD symptoms. And one of these gentlemen you're actually going to hear from tonight, but I reached 3 of them recently, and they're still meditating, they're still benefiting, they're still enjoying it. And you know, it's a small number, but I think it's remarkable. And we also did a study in bipolar disorder, and by the end of these 2 studies, almost every clinician in my group was getting trained in TM at their own expense. How's my timing? Have I got a little time?
Yeah.
He's my timekeeper. Anyway, so, you know, it's really good for us to wonder, what is it about this technique? This really simple, effortless technique, you do it twice a day for 20 minutes, such a gentle technique that can have such a profound effect. And the answer comes in a single word, and that word is stress, because stress is everywhere. I see it in my patients and myself. I see it on the evening news, hurricanes, tornadoes, poverty, unemployment, illnesses, wars. We see it every day. We'll see it in the combat-related PTSD that you're going to be hearing down the line. And it's a really terrible thing, the stress that goes on, because really the stress response is geared to be a short, targeted response to a specific issue. It's not supposed to go on, and it can be really devastating if it does. The great scientist who described first the harmful effects of stress, Selye, said, it's not stress that kills us, it's our reaction and response to it. And indeed, it does kill. And as we know, cardiovascular disease is one of the biggest killers. It kills 1 in 3 people. And I would actually like to show you just a few slides which illustrates the direct connection between TM, stress, illness, and death. Over here, we have several stress management techniques and their effects on blood pressure. Here we have TM, which has the largest effect. This is called a meta-analysis, where you pool the results of many different studies. And look here, muscle relaxation, biofeedback, significantly less reduction in blood pressure. And this combination treatment actually makes blood pressure worse. So when somebody says they're going to get a stress management technique, you've got to ask them, which one are you going to get? Because it does really make a difference. There's a specificity here. And of course, we know that high blood pressure is, as we call it, the silent killer. Next slide, please. And how does it kill? Here we've got a cartoon of 2 arteries. This one is nice and open with the clean linings of the artery. And this one you see is being infiltrated with cholesterol and inflammatory processes. And you see it's getting blocked off. So whatever the organ is at the other side of this artery, it's in good shape over there, but it's in trouble over there. So if this is your heart at the other end of that artery, you're a candidate for a heart attack. Or if it's your brain, you're a candidate for a stroke. Next slide, please. And this, in fact, does play out, because what these ingenious researchers did, this is the brilliant work of Robert Schneider and his collaborators, is they followed up people who years before had been in this random controlled study of TM for blood pressure. And what they found when they looked at the death records in the counties where these people had been studied was a 25% reduction in mortality over the 7 or 8 year follow-up period in the group that had done the TM 7 or 8 years before. And remember, they don't even know if these people continued to meditate or not. But so profound was the effect that over the course of years, it played out in the form of prolonged longevity. To their credit, they then went and did a prospective replication where they randomized to TM versus a health education control. And what you see, this is the rates of death, heart attack, and stroke in a health education group versus a TM group. And over 5 years, there was almost a 50% risk reduction in these hard endpoints, meaning fewer events and later events occurred. So what you're seeing here is a technique so gentle, so subtle, so effortless, but so powerful that day after day, year after year, it plays out in terms of major cardiovascular illness and longevity. And if it's doing that at the physical level, it's not difficult to imagine that it's doing that at the psychological level as well. Decreasing anxiety, decreasing stress, increasing joy. So I'll leave you all with that thought. Thank you.
David Lynch Foundation has provided scholarships in the last 6 years for over 150,000 at-risk students to learn to meditate. 150,000. And that's throughout the United States, all over Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, Asia. We are very fortunate, actually, to have here tonight with us, and I would just like to ask him to stand and be acknowledged, the grandfather of the David Lynch Foundation and the grandfather of bringing meditation to children, at-risk children. He's the one who coined the term quiet time. He's been an educator, a devoted educator here in Washington, D.C. for 46 years, and he is my hero and very dear friend. Would you please stand, Dr. George Rutherford, and receive our appreciation. With Dr. Rutherford's guidance, about 4 years ago, we started funding a program in San Francisco at the Visitation Valley Middle School. We're going to hear about that in a moment. But the first school, 350 kids started meditating, and from the success of that program, we've now taught 2,000, at the request of the San Francisco Unified School District, 2,000 middle school and high school kids have learned to meditate, along with 350 educators, principals, staff, administration. And what these schools do is they begin and end each day, part of the day's curriculum, with about 10 to 15 minutes of quiet time. And it's a voluntary program in this regard. The whole school is quiet, but a child can sit quietly and nap. They can do silent reading, or they can practice transcendental meditation. And like 99.99999% of the kids and everyone loves meditating. We're going to see right here, just for a moment, a wonderful video that was put together of highlights, some of the kids talking about that the program in San Francisco. I'm then going to show you a few of the research studies, quick, and then we're going to hear from the superintendent of the San Francisco School District in a meeting just last week, where he endorsed this program and said it was the single most effective educational innovation he's seen in 30 years. So if we could have that video.
I think that we have the most amazing kids. I love their energy and emotional intelligence. But what's different about these kids is that they need a lot more. Many of my students are in charge of taking care of their household, basically. Their parents work, and so they're in charge of their siblings. Or they work and help, financially support their families. There are a lot of kids who live in neighborhoods that aren't so good, crime, addiction. They see things that I never even thought about when I was in high school.
My last 2 years, I was locked up. Robbery, gang, things like that.
Different levels of stress that the students have. Some of it's environmental, some of it is organic and chemical. There's definitely stress that students experience around school and anxiety, around grades.
I feel like I do have a lot of stress in my life. I was always getting truancy letters. I was never really in school.
Our principal, Richard Duber, was the first to bring us the idea of having a quiet time program. It was certainly for me a level of skepticism regarding whether we could really get students at this school to be willing to try and meditate.
It would allow them that time for themselves that they don't get. And something that actually releases the stress as opposed to time for themselves that would make them more stressed.
We do it at the end of first period and at the end of seventh period, and the entire class gets quiet. Those students who want to meditate have that opportunity because we have an adult in the room who is making sure that they feel safe and comfortable.
When I had my first meditation, I felt so relaxed.
You sit and like you just like let
just
loose
relax.
and relax.
It's just you and your mind and going back and forth. Just you have to think this stuff out. Sometimes you just need that.
And I'm all tired and fatigued, but after quiet time, it just releases all the stress, helps you feel more energetic.
I used to say, I'm gonna get my grades up, I'm gonna do better. But yeah, it was just what I said, it never happened until I started meditating.
Because I got better grades and like, I'm not really all that mad anymore.
You felt so good and at peace, and you just felt like nothing like negative could get you.
I feel like refreshed, like I'm just full of energy and I'm just ready to like continue on my day.
I think it gives them rest. I think that it gives them a sense of well-being and security and like independence.
When I started meditating, like a week later, I started to change. And I'm not gonna change just like that, you feel me? You gotta, something gotta help me. I was just meditating a lot, like even Saturdays and Sundays. Before, it was like kind of hard to concentrate because I had a lot of problems in my life. I mean, I still do, but not like that.
I think that it's pretty amazing that kids have an opportunity to experience this, especially at this phase in their life.
Quiet time has also helped with the community in the classroom. For example, my fifth period class, they were really rough at the beginning of the year. And now it's just turned into such a nice way to start the day.
I just feel like I'm not alone. I have something with me that I can take that can help me keep me at peace and stuff like that.
Meditation is awesome.
I would love to see my students graduate from high school and go to college and learn to participate in the world in a way that is helpful and productive and fulfilling. In order for them to do that, they need love, they need education, they need support, and I think TM is a part of that.
Schools are battling what they call the predictive power of demographics. in San Francisco, and I'm sure it's everywhere the same, you can look at a zip code and you can say, these many kids are going to drop out of school, these many kids are going to end up in the prison pipeline. In these 4 schools, there's been a complete reversal. And if we could see the first chart, I'll just go through this very quickly. This data was provided by the San Francisco Unified School District, and I should say, in your goodie bag, in addition to receiving Dr. Rosenthal's book, you're going to get a little look for this. It's a little report on the San Francisco schools. In this first chart shows that attendance at Visitation Valley Middle School was at 98.3% last fall. And 18 of the graduating 8th graders, all meditators in that 8th grade class, received a perfect attendance. That means that 18 students did not miss a day of school for 3 years. Next chart. Suspensions trended down significantly. Visitation Valley used to have one of the highest suspension rates in the district. Now the school has one of the lowest, even compared to the middle-class schools. Next chart. Before quiet time, you can see on the left, before quiet time started at this school, none of the graduates went to the high-performing Lowell High School. This year, a record 18 8th graders are going to Lowell. And the final chart. When the Quiet Time program was at its first year at Visitation Valley, the 8th grade served as a control group. This allowed the San Francisco Unified School District to conduct rigorous analysis to determine if Quiet Time program had an impact on STAR test scores. When the 8th grade controls were compared to Quiet Time students, the analysis found that the Quiet Time students' scores were significantly higher, and the biggest shift was with the lowest performing schools, the below basic and the far below basic. And last year, the overall STAR test scores at Visitation Valley increased 40 points, the highest increase of any middle school in the district. And in honor of this, Jim Durkee, the principal of the school, was named the National Middle School Principal of the Year.
Good evening, I'm Candy Crowley. I want to turn the corner just a little bit, but not too hard. Tonight, I am pleased to announce in the DC area the launch of the David Lynch Foundation's Operation Warrior Wellness. This is a national outreach to teach Transcendental Meditation to 10,000 veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. You heard from Dr. Rosenthal, the study results are in, they're impressive, better than just about anything they've tried, certainly far less expensive, reducing anxiety, reducing depression, hypervigilance, insomnia, substance abuse, violent behavior, and suicidal tendencies. The potential here is enormous. I would like to introduce you tonight to World War II hero and the co-founder of Operation Warrior Wellness, Jerry Yellen.
I am just one of 16 million people, Americans, who served in World War II. I was 17 on Pearl Harbor Day and 18 on February 15, 1942, when I enlisted in the Army Air Corps to become a fighter pilot to fight against my enemy, the Japanese. I graduated from flying school in August of 1943 with 10 hours in a P-40. I was shipped to Hawaii to join the 78th Fighter Squadron with 28 other pilots. They kept 5 of us in the squadron to learn to become fighter pilots. In December, Bill Sutherland was killed in a mid-air collision with Howard Edmondson. And then we transferred to P-47s, and Ed Green got into a flat spin and didn't get out, and he was gone. We then got P-51s, and one day at Bellows Field, a young Navy man tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I knew Bob Ferris. And I said, yes, he's the last man in a 16-man formation doing a loop. And as I spoke his name, his airplane exploded, and little pieces of aluminum came floating down. And a few months later, John Lindner pulled the wings off of his airplane, and he was gone. On March 7, 1945, we flew from Saipan to Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima, 650 miles from Tokyo, was invaded by the Marines on February 19th. There were 67,000 Marines fighting 23,000 Japanese on 8 square miles of land. And the sights and the sounds and the smells remain with me as I speak to you tonight. On April 7th, 16 of the top pilots in the 78th Fighter Squadron flew the first escort mission ever flown over Japan. I was on that mission, and I watched the bombers, the B-29s, drop their firebombs on square miles of Tokyo, and never once did it occur to me that there were human beings on the ground. They were Japanese, they were my enemy. The second mission on April 12th, coming back, Fred White bailed out. His chute never opened. We watched him fall into the sea. Then Wayland was killed, and Whiteman, and Reitman. Lee Barguer was strafing on Chichijima, and a bomb on the ground exploded underneath his airplane, and he was gone. And Dick Schroepel was following me on an 8-ship mission of strafing the runways and the aircraft on Chichijima, and they were shooting at me, and they hit him, and he bailed out, got into a lifeboat, got out to sea, and mortar fire killed him. On July 8th, my classmate, Al Sharon from Waterloo, Iowa, called in, I'm hit, and I can't see, and he was gone. And Pudgy Carr, my tent mate, didn't come back on that day. On August 13th, we were called to a mission, to a briefing. We were going to fly another mission. Atomic bomb had been dropped. Rumors were that the war was over. And we were briefing. Phil Schlomberg, 19 years old from Brooklyn, leaned over and he says, Captain, if I go, I'm not coming back. I couldn't get him a replacement. And on the 14th, when we took off, I told him, just stick close to my wing. The war will be over. They're going to broadcast the code word Ohio before we get to Japan, before we strafe the airfields. Nobody heard the code word. We went in, we strafed. Phil Schlomberg was on my wing. We needed 90 gallons of fuel to get back to Iwo Jima, 3.5 hours. When someone called in 90 gallons, we turned around and we headed back. We headed back and Phil was on my wing. I led the flight into some clouds. And when we came out of the clouds, Phil Schlomberg was gone. We landed on Iwo Jima. We found out that the war had been over for 3 hours. I was discharged in October, came back to New Jersey, discharged, had been a captain, squadron leader. I had no more buddies, no airplane to fly, no missions to fly. I was a lost soul. I lost my soul on Iwo Jima. In 1949, I went on a blind date, and I met my wife, Helene. Good Friday, 1949. We were married on October 22nd, 1949. Our first son was born on November 6, 1950, and our fourth son on August 16, 1960. We moved a lot. I took a lot of jobs. I was damaged goods. I loved my wife. She loved me. She still loves me, and I still love her. But I was damaged goods until she watched a TV program that had Maharishi Mahesh Yogi talking about Transcendental Meditation. She decided to learn, and I learned as well. I had a dramatic change in my attitude about life, my attitude about me, my attitude about her, my attitude about my family. My life became better. I became a better person, a really better person. Today, we have more than 500,000 young veterans and 10 or 12 or 15 people in their families suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. What they're getting as treatment isn't working. Antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs are very expensive, and they don't do the job. According to Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel laureate, and Linda Bilmes, a Harvard professor who wrote a book that was published in 2008 called The $3 Trillion War, we in America are going to have to spend $15 billion every year for the next 50 or 60 years taking care of the mental aspect, the mental disease called post-traumatic stress disorder for the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. We have a better way of doing it. We have Transcendental Meditation. It helped me, it helped some of my friends, And it can help every single veteran who has ever been in combat, regardless of when or where it was. Operation Warrior Wellness started early last year when a young friend of mine from the Bosnia War committed suicide. And I knew what the David Lynch Foundation was doing. I knew what Bobby Roth was doing. And I called Bobby and I said, Bobby, do you think that the Lynch Foundation would open up their hearts and their minds and their money to produce so that we can teach TM to the veterans that are coming back? And he said yes. And so now we have Operation Warrior Wellness. America needs your help. The veterans and their families need your help. And Operation Warrior Wellness is well prepared to help. Thank you very much.
As a correspondent for CNN, I've traveled to a lot of bases. I've been in war zones. I've met a lot of military veterans like Jerry from World War II. Hearing his story, I can't help but think of there are those who suffer full-blown PTSD. So I've met totally dysfunctional veterans, but I've also met those who just have the residue of combat in their pores. And it is heartbreaking to talk to them because the details of their war experience they can't shake. I've talked to a World War II vet who still hates the sight of rice because the first person he killed had a box of rice in his backpack, and the veteran was starving and ate it, and he can't stand the sight of rice now. I met a Vietnam vet who at night hears the sound that bullets make when they go through the leaves in the jungle. I met a Korean vet who closes his eyes at night and sees the trucks coming this way piled high with dead bodies as he was walking that way as a new arrival in Korea, headed for the front. So it is more than the totally dysfunctional PTSD vets. It is also so many of them who need to shake loose from their pores that residue that's holding them back from being what they can be. This is a crisis. Individually, it's a crisis by the numbers. 18 veterans commit suicide every day, according to the VA. In fact, in the past 2 years, more soldiers and veterans have killed themselves than have been killed in combat. Think about that for a second. About 13% of homeless men are veterans, and nearly 50% of veterans with PTSD haven't received any help for it, and those who have, the help has been inadequate. Sometimes they don't return. So there is a lot here that obviously those of us who practice Transcendental Meditation think can come to play for the help for those who went off to war, regardless of what time they went off to war. Dan Burks was just 19 years old when he enlisted to fight in Vietnam.
December 18th, 1967, Newsweek. Yeah, 5 days after my birthday. This is a story called The Day's Work. And this is my unit. We went out and got ambushed. And this is me. Yeah, doing my job. We were attacked at this place called Buda. That fight went on for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The first night, I killed 14 people. There were 2,500 of them and 250 of us. The next morning, in front of my fighting position, 18 of our men did. So this is very, very, very distressing. And it creates huge amounts of distress in your system, And then later in the magazine, coincidentally, is this. This is an article about Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and a couple guys in my platoon. One of them got the magazine and he came running over. He said, "Burks, you got to read this." So I did, and I said, "I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that." because it talks about stress release, about becoming a whole person. So then the next part of the story is getting home. And that's a whole big deal because things changed. Things changed. All of a sudden, you're in a different culture. All these people don't understand you. They have no idea. They don't realize that you're always still in the rubber plantation of the jungle. You're always on an adrenaline high. You're looking to protect your buddies. You're looking to protect yourself. You're looking to kill the enemy. I stopped talking to my parents. I had really bad relationships with other people. I did not feel happiness. I did not feel sorrow. I did not feel surprise. My feelings were gone. So one day, my wife comes home, says, "Hey, I saw a poster about Transcendental Meditation." And I remembered that article in that magazine about Maharishi, and that I said I was going to do this. And so I go in, and he says, "Okay, sit down, do this." And I could not believe what happened. It was the difference between heaven and hell. It was absolutely transformational. All that feeling of stress and all that feeling of heaviness, I could feel it melt away from my head to my feet. And from that moment on, things changed. Things changed. No more drugs, no more alcohol. Life changed. My emotions came back. My life came back.
Thank you. This is my family, my wife Cindy, our son Salim. I'm here to tell you PTSD hurts. I was wounded by shrapnel. That wound totally shrinks to insignificance compared to the wound of PTSD. But we're also here to tell you, myself and my family, we're PTSD survivors. And we didn't just survive, we've thrived. And it's directly the result of learning Transcendental Meditation. And I'm really here to thank the David Lynch Foundation for what they're doing for this cause. The David Lynch Foundation is providing an opportunity with the cutting-edge technology of Transcendental Meditation to stop the suffering of our warriors and their families. And TM needs to be added to the treatment that is already going on. Now, not later. We need to stop the festering of the wound of TM. Now, not later. And with your help, we can do this today, not later. And we can start today. Thank you very much for coming.
So Dan reminds us that for every veteran in trouble, there's a family also in trouble. Mothers every day in the United States watch their children go off to war, and often when they return home, these sons and daughters are different. They are distant, or they are lost, or they are angry, some of them suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. This is exactly what Julia George faced when her son David came home from Iraq.
My name is Julia Elena George. I am the mother of David Maurice George. When he finished high school, he decided to go to the Army for one major reason. I will never forget that. He was very, very upset and heartbroken when the Twin Towers collapsed. he says, I'm going to go.
The war started while I was in basic, so when I got out of basic, they gave us this speech that, you know, you kind of hear in the movies where it's like, look to your left, look to your right. These guys are not going to be alive.
We spoke many times over the phone while he was in Iraq, and he was telling me what he was going through.
The big thing for me was a car bomb had hit our compound and gotten through the gate, and luckily one of the guys shot the car till they detonated, till the people inside detonated. There were two enemy combatants, I would say. Hit the trigger right, I guess, as they were dying, and blew the car up, and subsequently like 50 people were injured in the attack.
It's so horrible, these explosions and killing, and seeing his friends, arms here, heads there, right in front of you, your good friends. Oh, when he come back. That's the part that sometimes I don't like to talk, because it's so painful. He was out of his mind for the effects of the war. He was disrespectful, he was cursing me.
I just gravitated towards alcohol. I bought whiskey, I bought Jack Daniels. And that's how that started, because as soon as I had a couple swigs, I was like, all right, well, that takes care of that. And so every time afterwards, when it would creep up, you go drink.
And not obeying the law, not obeying nothing, absolutely nothing. He had many car accidents because he was drinking. He said, I don't care, Mom, I don't care. If I die tomorrow and I crash a car. And he told me, one of my friends just died. Don't you understand? I am supposed to be there. If I would be there, he will not be dead. And I'm here. What can I do? Tell me, what can I do being here? So I was afraid many times he will kill himself. Many. That one day when I come from work or when I go downstairs, when I wake up in the morning, he will be dead. I lived like that for so many years. When he found the DM, he changed his way of thinking. He started appreciating his life. And he's another person. He's normal. He's thinking about the future, thinking about respecting, more than anything, respecting himself, loving himself. The first class that he went to, he says, every day, every time that I meditate is better, and I feel better and better and better. Thanks to the TM meditation. He's not drinking, he is happy. It's beautiful, it's incredible.
The first time I meditated, I experienced this relief from the constant anxiety attack my life had become. I didn't even realize I was that stressed out, but after my first 20 minutes, when I came out of it, I realized, I was like, that was a break. Now, being someone who's meditated for a year and 2 months, I'm so happy. I'll never stop. You know, it has this compounding effect of just getting better and better, and this great feeling lasts longer and longer the more I meditate. You know, why stop?
That is the boy that I raised. TM saved his life.
This is my mom, Julia George. All right.
Thank you very much for coming and supporting this wonderful, wonderful organization. If you know, or if you know somebody who is suffering, like my son and I suffered, please contact or tell your friends to contact to this wonderful organization. Thank you.
PTSD, you've heard 1,000 times. What does it mean? It's a bad day. Everyone's had it. You know, that's the only way I can explain it. There's nothing but saying that it's a bad day that doesn't go away. You wake up with it, and it gets worse, and it gets worse. And I end up treating the ones I love like my mom. I only saw that portion of her video for the first time yesterday because I didn't want to relive how I treated her and how I made her feel. It was something I didn't want to go through again. I knew it was bad for me, and I knew I made it bad for her. But I couldn't take care of myself. Everything was going down the drain, dropping out of college. But when I started meditating, was it a year and 2 months I said there? And I remember that, and I thought I was like smiling. I thought I was like, yeah, a year and 2 months, but I see it, and I wasn't that happy. But now I've been meditating for 2 years, 2 months, like 3 weeks and two days, I think. So, yeah. And right, I'm smiling, I think. It's good, it's good. And I'm gonna keep doing it because of Transcendental Meditation, you know, I went back I'm in a real university now. I'm finishing my bachelor's in a year. I love my mom. We're getting along great. The family's awesome. And I'm here to really speak and spread the news that this is changing people's lives for the better, and everybody should get a part of it. So thank you for supporting this. Thanks for coming tonight.
When we talk about transcendental meditation, we're talking about a technique. It's a technique that anyone can do. It's not a philosophy. It's not a religion. It's not a way of life. It's a technique. And you can be as skeptical as you want. And the technique, because it's a technique, works just as well as if you think, oh, I'm into meditation. That's why, and it's also effortless. Anyone can do it. A child 10 years old with ADHD who couldn't close his or her eyes for 30 seconds without going nuts can sit and meditate for 10 minutes and get those benefits. Dr. Serena Grosswald is a University of Washington, Georgetown University trained cognitive learning specialist. She actually has been instrumental, probably a pioneer in the area of research on ADHD and transcendental meditation. If any of you have children who have ADD or ADHD, this is a woman to talk to. And she also pioneered the research on transcendental meditation and post-traumatic stress disorder. What we want to do now is we're going to hear a few words from Dr. Grosswald. Then we're going to hear a few words from Dr. Fred Travis, who's a renowned brain researcher. And then we'll hear a few words from Ed Schloman, great Vietnam vet, Marine. And then we're going to really enjoy a dialogue, a conversation between Candy Crowley and David Lynch. So that's just to give you the overview of where we're going. And Serena, we've heard some very emotionally moving experiences, individuals. I know that you've been working in an outreach to bring this to veterans. You know, what success? Is there interest? Is there interest from, active duty? Is there interest from the VA? Where do we stand today?
Well, we're finding a lot of interest. I mean, as has been mentioned, as hard as the Veterans Administration tries to respond to the significant problem, what it's developed into, it's still, you can see that people are still suffering. They really don't have the answer. And we have many who come to us and say they don't want to take the medication. It makes them feel, as David used to say, actually, that you just saw, it makes them feel stupid. And so they're looking for something. And we get great response from the providers who spend every day, all day, trying to help these veterans, and from the veterans themselves, that this is a program that they are interested in and they do want to do, and they find very quickly. I had the good fortune to be involved in the research with Dr. Rosenthal, our study that's just came out in military medicine. But it's so rewarding to really see the kinds of changes, like someone with David George who was in our study. So we get that kind of response, both from the healthcare providers and from the veterans themselves.
Without showing any charts, just tell us elaborate on some of the changes that you're seeing with the veterans. What does the data show? I know it's published in a peer-reviewed journal. What does it show?
Well, we actually are building on research that was originally done in the 1980s with Vietnam veterans. So this is not the first study that's been done on post-traumatic stress disorder, but there was the sense among the military that, well, we need to see how it works with these veterans. And yes, every war is different. And the experience that every soldier or Marine or other military personnel or contractors, their experience is individual, and every war has been different. But every sufferer of PTSD is suffering the same effect in the brain, the same inability to manage their responses to loud noises, to walking beside a trash can and thinking it's an IED. So what we've seen is the same kinds of results that we saw in the 80s with Vietnam veterans, where there was significant reductions in the PTSD symptoms, improvements in sleep. Sleep is a significant aspect. Major reductions in alcohol use. We find no matter what war anyone has experienced that they self-medicate with alcohol. And very quickly, drop in alcohol use and other substance use. Improvements in quality of life. And that's sort of the same thing that we saw with these veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Dramatic improvements in life, reduction in depression, as Dr. Rosenthal mentioned, 50% reduction in PTSD symptoms.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Actually, I have one more question. One more question. Wish list, ideal study that you and Dr. Rosenthal would like to do, with vets. Describe it.
Well, I think we'd like to do a big study so that we really can demonstrate the effectiveness and be able to do a long-term study.
How many?
I think, gosh, we do 500, 1,000, or do as many people as we can do so that we can help stop the suffering.
And is that the step? Do you think, this is kind of a leading question, transparency, but do we have to wait for that study to come out? I know Dr. Rosenthal has said, you said that with your SAD, seasonal affective disorder, it was one person who had some benefits or changes from the treatment. Was that the case?
What I really said is,
he'll tell you what he said.
Everything has to begin somewhere. Somebody said to me, these are only 5 veterans. What can you say about it? I said, I can say it's a beginning. We started off with seasonal affective disorder with one person where we saw this amazing transformation with light. In the controlled study, initial controlled study, which was really, we were just able to scrape together the funding to do it, there were 9 patients. That study's now been cited well over 1,000 times. It's a citation classic. So if you've got a powerful effect size, you can get a lot of traction with a relatively small number of subjects. I would love to see a study with 20 or 30 in each arm. And I think we've got enough of a signal now to really justify going forward and doing such a study. I would love to do it with Serena.
Final comments.
Well, I think the research is there. As Dr. Rosenthal said, we started with a small number that's reinforcing the results that we saw in the 80s. There's so much research already on TM in the related symptoms, anxiety, stress, depression, mood, quality of life. The data is there, and the time is now. There are people who are suffering and lives that are being ruined, and we can do something now.
Our final interview, brief chat, is with Dr. Fred Travis, who is recognized around the world as one of the leading researchers on the brain and meditation. Dr. Travis heads the Center for Brain, Consciousness, and Cognition. He's had about 40 studies published in peer-reviewed journals on the effects of meditation on the brain, and I'd just like to ask Fred to show us some charts and comment on what we've been talking about.
Thank you, Bobby. So first chart, please. We're going to be talking about the brain. And the reason we're going to talk about the brain is because the brain is the interface between inner and outer. And depending on the quality of your brain function, will depending on how you see and hear what I'm saying. Depending on your brain function will determine your response. Second thing we're going to talk about the brain is always changing. Your brain is a river, not a rock. As a river cuts into a hill, as it flows down the hill, so what's happening is the streams of electrical activity over your brain are leaving a mark on your brain. And if the experience is holistic, what it leaves is a greater integrated style of functioning. If it's traumatic, what it does is it leaves a dysfunctional mark on the brain. Next slide. This is what the brain looks like from a traumatic experience. What we have here is the traumatic experience turns on the amygdala. In the men, it turns on the amygdala to the right, which is context. In the women, it turns on the amygdala to the left, which are the details of experience. The amygdala is your fear center. So what this is doing is creating a veil of fear through which you're experiencing the world. So you're hypervigilant. You're vulnerable. You think people don't understand you. Because this is what your brain is telling you. In addition, the amygdala is turning on the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response turns off the front part of the brain. Front part of the brain is the boss of the brain. It's what lets you put things together. Now, next slide. Traumatic experiences have turned on the amygdala. To turn it off, we need an experience that's the opposite of trauma. We need an experience which is holistic and not fragmented. An experience which is silent and not chaotic. And meditation experiences bring these kinds of experiences to you. But meditations are different. So we need to choose our meditation thoughtfully. Next slide. There's a lot of information on this slide, so let me take you through it. First, this arrow here on the left is indicating level of cognitive control from lowest to highest. The highest level of cognitive control are meditations that are in focused attention. These are your concentration meditations. You keep the mind on one thing, you don't let the mind move. When you're doing that, this is what your brain looks like. It's called gamma EEG. It's very fast. It's 20 to 50 cycles per second. Meditations in this category, for instance, are Tibetan Buddhists, loving kindness and compassion. Middle level of control, the category is open monitoring. In these meditations, it's medium level of control because you're letting things go through your mind, but you're not controlling. When you're doing this, you see a slower frequency. It's called theta. It looks like this. It goes up and down 5 to 8 times per second. In this category are meditations like mindfulness, zazen. Now, meditations in these first two categories keep the mind in the process of thinking, of doing. They keep the mind in that same veil of fear that PTSD is turned on. And so what's reported is these meditations have very limited effects on reducing PTSD symptoms. The last category, automatic self-transcending, is lowest level of cognitive control. These are meditations which transcend their own activity. These are meditations which allow you to transcend thinking and experiencing your essence, inner pure consciousness, inner self-awareness. And these have to be automatic. They have to be effortless because any doing would not have let that process happen. Transcendental meditation is in this category. Next slide. This is what the brain is doing during transcendental meditation. What we see here is if it's red, it's more active. So the front of the brain is more active. Notice the subcortical areas of the brain are less active, the colored blue. The front of the brain, your integrative system, is more active. It's able to take experience, put it into a whole. The part of the brain that has to do with hypovigilance is now more quiet. What's happening in transcending is you're resetting the mind and body. What's happening when you're transcending is those fear signals from the brain are being turned off. What's happening is now the integrative center is able to see the bigger picture. The hypervigilance is settling down. TM takes you beyond thinking to silence. Transcending thinking allows you to transcend PTSD. Final slide. Bottom line. Every experience changes the brain. Trauma turns on the fear center. It turns off the thinking centers of the brain. Transcending leads to a new state, restful alertness. This restores balanced functioning of mind and body. It relieves PTSD. It supports happiness and success in life. Thank you very much.
Ed Schloman has served as a United States Marine Sergeant in Vietnam and retired from the New York Air National Guard as Chief Master Sergeant. He served 28 years in the service. Ed and his absolutely wonderful wife, Judy, have raised 3 children. Ed has an amazingly huge heart and has dedicated his life to ensuring the economic, physical, and spiritual well-being of all disabled veterans. He, along with his dear friend Jerry Yellen, serve as co-chairs of the Operation Warrior Wellness. And I also had the great privilege of teaching Ed and Judy to meditate about 7 months ago. Would you please welcome Ed Schloman?
Thank you, Bobby. Bobby is such an unsung hero throughout this whole foundation, and thank you for everything. I only have a short speech, that's why they brought me out here. My wife says if you live long enough, you will experience everything in life, and this is a great experience. Yesterday, Jerry and I was awarded the Resilient Warrior Award by the David Lynch Foundation in New York City. And the only reason that it's not down here being presented to you, it's somewhere in between a first place bowling trophy and a monument. But we really have a lot of work ahead of us. As big as that award is, the challenge is as big as we have today. And as I look out to all of you, I see 99% of America. That is right. 99% of America is being protected by 1% of our military. And that price is coming at such a grave cost. And you heard some of the success stories. Today, Jerry and I and Serena were with some senators. It's falling on deaf ears. When you see the results of the education system with the positive results, that turns the tide. We need to start turning the tide to show some positive results from our military. It's not going to get done unless that 99% business people like me come forward and say enough is enough. We want to sponsor X amount of veterans, and we want to show your senators this is how you do it. And that's the way we're going to change it. Jerry and I have a plan, and it's going to come to fruition, and all will hear about it. But we want to be able, with the David Lynch Foundation, to train 10,000 veterans this year. Now that number is large, but that's so minuscule compared to how many are out there. And you only seen some of the success stories. There are so many unsuccessful stories out there. Transcendental meditation is that cure. It's a warrior's cure. It's non-religious. Meditation has been around since the samurai warrior. We train our children as good Americans to be good. Don't steal, don't fight, always don't fight amongst yourselves. However, when they're trained in military, we teach them how to kill. And that image never, as you heard from Jerry Yellen, how many years ago he performed that task, it never gets forgotten. The mind takes pictures, but it leaves negatives. And those negatives always come back to you at 3 o'clock in the morning. And whether you have a business, you have bad feelings sometimes with business, that's stress. That's why some of David's people are multi-billionaires who come to David Lynch to find out, how do I get rid of the stress even though I'm so successful in life? Well, I'm going to help them. I'm going to ask them for some money. That's number one. But again, our challenge is big, but Operation Warrior Wellness is totally bigger than that. On behalf of Jerry and myself and all meditating warriors and those who will soon be able to learn, thank you for this high honor, and Semper Fi.
I'm a great supporter of Transcendental Meditation. I've been using it for almost 40 years now. And I think it is a great tool for anyone to have and to be able to utilize as a tool for stress. And stress, of course, comes with almost every business, but especially considering the stress that our men and women of the armed forces would go through, the anxieties of going either in or coming from combat, and stress syndromes of various types. I think it's a great tool. I think there's enough studies out there that show that Transcendental Meditation, or TM as we all call it, is something that can benefit everybody. And I congratulate you and everyone there tonight. And again, apologize for not being there. I want to pay tribute to Captain Yellen and Colonel Brian Reese and Ed Sloman, Master Sergeant, and everyone there who is supporting this organization. I think you'll find it's a great system to use, and life in general. Otherwise, why would I have been doing it all these years? Almost half of my life. I've just calculated. So have a good evening. I'm sorry I'm not there. Bye-bye.
Six years ago, David Lynch had this idea to establish a foundation to provide TM to any child, any place in the world, if they wanted it. Bob told you earlier about 150,000 children from the Middle East to Africa, the United States, of course, Latin America, Asia. Now, transcendentally meditate, if that's a verb. But the foundation has grown beyond the children. You have just heard providing scholarships to veterans to learn how to meditate, American Indians living in poverty on reservations, homeless adults and children who are in reentry programs, as well as incarcerated adults and teenagers. So very widespread. David's been the driving force behind all of this. He's traveled around the world. He's talked in dozens of countries to hundreds of thousands of people. He wrote a book, and you should get it. I had to read it 3 times to understand it, but you should get it. It's called Catching the Big Fish, Meditation, Creativity, and Consciousness. He has directed and produced several films about TM and these programs. I don't know if you've ever watched some of the films he's produced, but he is an artistic genius, a hands-on philanthropist, a humanitarian. Please welcome David Lynch.
Candy, I'm kind of starstruck because I love you so much. I'm used to seeing you on television.
Well, and I'm used to watching you. I have a fun story to tell you about it, but I want to ask you first just about the foundation, because this was a dream of yours. Where do you think you are now in the building of it? What do you envision for the future and your participation in it?
Well, as you heard, it was started about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was, the foundation is to raise money to get Transcendental Meditation to any student, really any human being who wants it anywhere in the world. And as you've also heard, this simple technique is so magical. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi started teaching this over 55 years ago. And he started in India, and he taught this technique all around the world. 10 times he went around, teaching. And there have been 500 or 600 studies. He wanted this technique attacked from every angle and researched. And there's never been a study that shows anything negative about it, and studies hundreds, thousands of benefits from practicing this. And I'm just saying, I am personally sick of research studies. I want to get it to the people. I want to get it to the people. I love Serena and I love Norman for doing these research studies. And what they're going to find, they can test 5 people, they can test 500, they can test 5,000, and it'll be the same. If you're a human being, this technique will work. And your life will, as the soldiers said, get better and better and better. As the students said, it'll get better and better and better. You get a key, and this key opens the door to the treasury within. If being quiet for 20 minutes would do it, you know, it would be a done deal. We'd all be enlightened, we'd all be super happy, it would be great. It's a special, very special, unique technique, a key that takes you to the deepest level of life. You transcend. That's why Norman's book is called Transcendence. This is the big ocean of pure bliss consciousness. This experience of transcending is the experience that's missing from our lives. Just add that. Just add that. You got it made. You got it made.
So I have a quick story to tell you, and that is that Bob Roth taught me how to meditate. And we had a sort of this introductory session where he said, well, tell me what you're worried about and tell me what you think might happen. Do you have any questions? And I said, I'm not sure I want to mellow out. I mean, I like, I want to, I'm in journalism. I want to keep my creative edge. I don't want to be all Zen my whole life. And so Bobby says, hang on one second. He brings out his cell phone and he, dials us and goes, so David, are you meditating? And David says, just getting ready to. And he says, so I got Candy here. She wants to know if you're going to lose, if she'll lose her creative edge if she meditates. And it dawned on me that he was talking to David Lynch. I'm thinking, okay. So we're now asking the guy who did Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive, whether I'm going to lose my creative edge. So that sort of answered the question for me. But what brought you to it? And you did this before you you started TM before you made any of those.
Yes. I was working on my film Eraserhead when I started Transcendental Meditation. And I always say, artists, all I really wanted to do was first paint and then make films. And I thought meditation, when I heard about it first, I thought it was a total waste of time. People sitting with their eyes closed, not for me, I want to work. But I had no idea what they were doing with those eyes closed. I heard a phrase, true happiness lies within, not out there, and it had a ring of truth to it. Then one day the penny dropped and I thought, well, maybe meditation is the way to go within. Then I find out there's 10,000 forms of meditation. And like they say, everybody loves their form of meditation. But honestly and truly, if somebody took away Transcendental Meditation, I would not know what form to go to get the same thing. They're different. And as Dr. Fred Travis told you, and artists, they want to keep their edge. And they think they like, I thought this, a little bit of suffering, some melancholy, some anger, and like this. And I think, as I say, it started in France, which I love the French. but the starving artist in the garret. And the starving artist, this is it's very romantic because you can get girls. And so the girls come and they say, oh, may I maybe cook you some dinner? And maybe I'll spend the night. So this works very good. But if the artist was really suffering, really and truly suffering, like I said, if you have a splitting headache, you have nausea, and you have diarrhea on top of that, how much work are you going to get done and how much are you going to enjoy it? And this thing of depression and sorrow and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder and all this fear and anger, this is the enemy to creativity. Artists want ideas, they want energy, and they want happiness, really, just like to get up and boogie and create. It's beautiful. And this thing of negativity is truly the enemy to creativity.
And what would imagine your life for me over the past 40 years without TM?
I've been meditating every day, so I don't know what it would be like, but I think, I'm pretty sure, I don't know what it would be like, but I'm very, very happy I'm meditating. And I think there's many, many, many creative people that don't meditate. And I always say, they're just going to get more creative. There's many happy people. They're just going to get more happy. And that each human being has a full potential, each one of us. And they say this full potential is called enlightenment. And we don't hear about this. Candy may start talking about it on the news, but we don't hear too much about this. But we do have a full potential. And this full potential flowers by transcending. And higher states of consciousness can come. So much happiness, so many beautiful experiences we have in our future. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Just get this technique and stay regular.
And let me go at it a slightly different way, because people always say to me when they find out that I meditate, what does it do for you? And I find, even for a writer, that I can't quite put it in a capsule. Can you?
The main thing, I think, what it does is it brings happiness. It brings happiness. And the world starts looking better and better. And there's an analogy. If you're wearing dark green, filthy glasses, this is your world. And if you get a technique whereby you can clean those and make them rose-colored or gold-colored, then that becomes your world. And it seems like the picture gets bigger and bigger and bigger. People start looking more and more familiar, nicer to see. The feeling inside, you don't mind, you feel better and better in your body. As you've heard, and things that used to drive you crazy don't drive you so crazy anymore. But I still, as my wife Emily will tell you, get cut off in traffic. I'll go totally ballistic.
Yeah.
But you're laughing the next second. You can't hold on to anger so much anymore. You can't hold on to sorrow. You can get very sorrowful, but you can't hold on to it. You can get really angry. Next second, you just feel it just goes. It doesn't eat you up. And life just gets more fun. Everything gets more fun. Everything gets more fun. And they say we're supposed to be happy. We're not supposed to suffer. We're not supposed to suffer. There's so much suffering, but it's not natural. It's natural to be happy. It's so beautiful.
I agree with you when Dr. Rosenthal said he doesn't get mad at the guy that cuts him off. I'm thinking, whoa, I am not there yet.
No. And I bet you if we went driving with Norman, we might see a different story. But he'd be laughing like he is now next moment.
Do people approach you about TM and say...
Women approach me.
Oh. mean, do you find that because I find people say, well, something's different about you. Of course, you've been doing it for 40 years, so nothing's different about you, from then. But that people do come and say to me, tell me about this. What does it bring you? Do you find that happens to you?
Yes. And, like they say, it's true. When you start meditating, the change, you don't feel so different. It's so natural, the lifting of these things, the gold coming in, the garbage going out. It's so natural. Other people see it before really you. They notice these things. Like I say, I had this anger, which I take out on my first wife, and really make her life hell. And I make her life hell, especially in the morning. 2 weeks after I start meditation, she comes to me and she says, "What's going on?" And as I say, I was quiet for a while because it could have been any number of things she might have been referring to. Then I said, what do you mean? I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "This anger, where did it go?" And I really didn't realize till she said it. I wasn't angry inside anymore. It was so beautiful. It just lifted away. I didn't try. You can try to be good maybe for a day or a week, but then, something happens and you just can't do it anymore.
And my final question, because
Bobby
is lurking over there. I'm getting the evil eye.
But it has been a good evening. Don't you agree?
It's a little bit of a scientific question, which you can beg off of if you want. But are there people I get people all the time saying to me, "Oh, it wouldn't work for me. I couldn't do that. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't do that." Are there people who are immune to the benefits of TM?
No. Like I said, if you're a human being, there's so many people. Just last night, our friend, he's very interested in starting. And he said, "But it will never work. It'll never work." And he was almost apologizing for being maybe one of the first failures. He knew he was going to fail. Like Bobby said, you do not have to believe it will work and it'll work. You can be so afraid it won't work and it will work. It's a magical thing. You need a legitimate teacher. It takes about 4 days, about an hour a day. Then you have this technique for yourself for the rest of your life. And it is easy, effortless, and supremely profound. If it was very difficult, it would never go in schools. It would never help the children. It's so beautiful to see this torment inside of people and all these things on the surface. It doesn't take that torment away. Pretty pictures, nice talk, even some very, very nice kissing. It doesn't do it. It doesn't address the torment inside. Einstein said, if you want to solve a problem, you got to solve it from underneath the problem. You can't get deeper than the transcendent. Modern science's unified field. It's there, always been there. It's ancient technology. It will get you there. Up it comes, a brand new ball game. Life gets better and better and better.
David Lynch, I lied. When's your next project?
I don't know, Candy, but I'm going to be watching for you on television.
It's a deal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Candy.
Thank you. It was fun. Goodbye. It was fun.
Well, that was a full day. Thank you all for coming. On your way out the door, there's a goodie bag. We'll have some wonderful things up to reinforce what you just heard, in addition to, in particular, Dr. Rosenthal's New York Times best-selling book. Really great. And in that goodie bag, you're going to receive, there's a card you can fill out about if you want more information or if you'd like to sign up for the course. And Mario and Linda Orsatti are the directors of the David Lynch Foundation in Washington, D.C. Mario, raise your hand there. This has turned into a very enthusiastic, almost Washington Redskins Super Bowl sort of. I mean, not recent, but you know. I'm a 49er fan. Yeah, right. We would like to, Bob, I would like to thank on behalf of actually all of us here, the Washington, D.C. Host Committee for their incredible leadership and tremendous support in bringing all of you here and all of us here together this evening. And they include, and please stand up and please give an amazing round of applause for Rona and Jeffrey Abramson. Gina Beckman, who's just amazing, organizing everything here. By the way, I have a list of 110 names. No. So I'll just read through them. Patrice and Scott Brickman. Okay, let's clap. Carolyn Brody, who I also taught to meditate. Randolph Carter, Tom Clark, George Crowley, Linda Manquist and Mario Orsatti, Elizabeth Oliver Farrow, Jane, oh yeah, amazing. Elizabeth is a miracle worker. Jane Ottenberg and Richard Crichton. I'd also like to thank the staff at American University under the leadership of Jason Lurie for their help in coordinating this event, and a very great thanks to Gary Abramson. Please stand up, Gary. No, he won't. No. Okay. He is the chairman emeritus of American University and a partner of the Tower Companies for donating this lovely facility. We are going to, yes, thank you. So many other people to thank, so many people to thank. I've thanked Jessica Stewart enough, but I want to thank Jeff Stein for editing together this very quickly of the San Francisco schools. That was just an absolutely beautiful thing. So, we conclude now with a vision of where this is all going. A 2-minute collage montage of children meditating, funded by the David Lynch Foundation, children meditating all over the world. 2 minutes, and then we thank you all very much. Be sure to pick up your goodie bag, and there's wonderful desserts that the Abramsons have provided for us, so be sure to take some of those. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, David Lynch, and the love of his life, Emily.
Bipolar disorder, whom I was treating, began to talk with me about transcendental meditation. Now, of course, we all know bipolar disorder is a serious condition, and it requires medications and various standard treatments. But what this young man said to me was, you know, along with everything you're giving me, there's something else that I have added to the mix that is making me really happy 90% of the time, and that is transcendental meditation. And I quizzed him about that, and I said, you know, I did that way back in South Africa when the Beatles went to visit Maharishi. And then I just abandoned it. He said, you should get back to meditating, Dr. Rosenthal. So I listened, he said it again, and I was thinking, yeah, where am I going to fit 20 minutes twice a day into my schedule? But you know, that was one of those moments where I thought, wow, you know, he says it's really helped him, he says it stabilized him. What have I got to lose? Let me give it a shot. So my good friend Bob Roth happened to be in town, and he refreshed my technique. You know, once you've got that mantra, then it's with you forever, and taught me how to use it properly. And, you know, I wish I could say that there was a sudden epiphany, but there wasn't. But I kept at it, prompted by my patient who kept saying, now, are you doing it regularly? You've got to do it regularly, otherwise it's not going to work. So I started to do it regularly, and then gradually something very interesting began to happen in my head. I got calmer and less reactive. You know, the ordinary irritations and the frustrations, the disappointments of everyday life that would rattle me. Now, I still don't like them, believe me, but instead of the reflexive reaction, I just began to have a more thoughtful response. A simple example is somebody cuts you off in the traffic. And I've seen people cussing, and I used to be one of those people. But really, I'm much more likely to say, you know, maybe he's in a hurry, maybe he has an emergency, maybe he has a problem. But why should I let it become my problem? And it's coming from a very authentic place. It's not a cognitive therapy thing that as soon as I feel angry, I say, well, no, wait a sec, now you're feeling angry and you got a bad thought and you got to fix that and you got to have a good thought instead. It's just coming kind of very organically from within, and that was really interesting. And you know, I've stress, because stress is everywhere. I see it in my patients, in myself. I see it on the evening news. Hurricanes, tornadoes, poverty, unemployment, illnesses, wars. We see it every day. We'll see it in the combat-related PTSD that you're going to be hearing down the line. And it's a really terrible thing, the stress that goes on, because really the stress response is geared to be a short, targeted response to a specific issue. It's not supposed to go on, and it can be really devastating if it does. The great scientist who described first the harmful effects of stress, Selye, said, it's not stress that kills us, it's our reaction and response to it. And indeed, it does kill. And as we know, cardiovascular disease is one of the biggest killers. It kills 1 in 3 people. And I would actually like to show you just a few slides which illustrates the direct connection between TM, stress, illness, and death. Over here, we have several stress management techniques and their effects on blood pressure. Here we have TM, which has the largest effect. This is called a meta-analysis, where you pool the results of many different studies. And look here, muscle relaxation, biofeedback, significantly less reduction in blood pressure. And this combination treatment actually makes blood pressure worse. So when somebody says they're going to get a stress management technique, you've got to ask them, which one are you going to get? Because it does really make a difference. There's a specificity here. And of course, we know that high blood pressure is, as we call it, the silent killer. Next slide, please. And how does it kill? Here we've got a cartoon of two arteries. This one is nice and open with the clean linings of the artery, and this one you see is being infiltrated with cholesterol and inflammatory processes, and you see it's getting blocked off. So whatever the organ is at the other side of this artery, it's in good shape over there, but it's in trouble over there. So if this is your heart at the other end of that artery, you're a candidate for a heart attack. Or if it's your brain, you're a candidate for a stroke. Next slide, please. And this, in fact, does play out, because what these ingenious researchers did, this is the brilliant work of Robert Schneider and his collaborators, is they followed up people who years before had been in this random controlled study of TM for blood pressure. And what they found when they looked at the death records in the counties where these people had been a fairly organized person, but I became more so, better at setting priorities, better at getting things done. So, you know, I've always kind of used myself as a bit of a laboratory for my patients, and I thought, you know, it's really helping me. Maybe I should recommend it to this person with an anxiety problem or that person with an alcohol problem or whatever. And I'm finding that it's beginning to help people. They're coming back to me, they're saying it's really helping. Some, of course, more than others. One very dramatic case, a woman whose husband had a really terrible anger problem, and they had tried absolutely everything with very little benefit. Woman is a therapist herself, and it just didn't help, and it was very unhappy. He was really a nice guy, and nothing had helped, and I thought, what's to lose here? So I explained the story, and recently I had occasion to ask her, and she said, you know, it's an absolute game changer. She said, after everything we went through, I just can't believe that this technique has made that much difference. Now, of course, you know, we all know nothing is a panacea. But even if some people are getting this degree of benefit, then surely it's something we need to be exploring. And indeed, the next thing was that I did do some research on it in post-traumatic stress disorder in veterans who had been in combat. You're going to hear more about that later. But last week, we had a paper published in Military Medicine on 5 veterans who had done TM for their combat-related PTSD, you know, with really good effects. At a basic level, it's kind of intriguing that they were able to actually sit there and do the technique, that it was feasible. But much more than that, within 2 months, they had a 50% decrease in their PTSD symptoms. And one of these gentlemen you're actually going to hear from tonight, but I reached 3 of them recently, and they're still meditating, they're still benefiting, they're still enjoying it. And you know, it's a small number, but I think it's remarkable. And we also did a study in bipolar disorder, and by the end of these 2 studies, almost every clinician in my group was getting trained in TM at their own expense. How's my timing? Have I got a little time?
Yeah.
He's my timekeeper. Anyway, so, you know, it's really good for us to wonder, what is it about this technique? This really simple, effortless technique, you do it twice a day for 20 minutes, such a gentle technique that can have such a profound effect. And the answer comes in a single word, and that word is strength.
Hello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, one and all, and thank you for being here. Tonight, I think you're going to hear some very great news in the area of education, and also some very great news for any of our soldiers suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, Operation Warrior Wellness. Now this microphone is going to get turned over to Bobby Roth. Bobby is the vice president of the David Lynch Foundation and pretty much works 24/7 to help people all over the world. Please welcome the great Bobby Roth.
Thank you very much, David. And on behalf of the David Lynch Foundation, it's wonderful to welcome you all here tonight. It's been said that Americans are swimming in an ocean of stress. And if that's the case, our children are drowning in it, our veterans are drowning in it, American Indians living on impoverished reservations are drowning in it. So many at-risk people in this country are drowning in stress. But it's not just stress anymore. It's traumatic stress, far deeper, far more insidious. And that is a reminder for cell phones. Not as stressful as that, but please turn off your cell phone. I cued the cell phone there so that, otherwise it would have been a little obtrusive if I would have said something. But traumatic stress. And for those fortunate children and those fortunate individuals who have access to medication and have access to talk therapy, there is some help. But for millions and millions and millions of people who go untreated, unhealed, and even those who have medication and talk therapy, it's some help. 10 million children in America on antidepressant medication under the age of 12. 5 million children diagnosed with ADHD, and the number 3 cause of death among teenagers in this country, suicide. We have a very serious problem. And tonight, in a very enjoyable way, we're going to look at a very substantive solution. And we're going to investigate the power of meditation. You've all heard that. But specifically, we're going to investigate the power of a technique called Transcendental Meditation, a technique that David Lynch has been practicing for almost 40 years, and as he likes to say, has never missed a meditation in those years. A technique that has an enormous amount of research. And we're going to look at it, as David said, in 2 main areas: schools and also our veterans. And to start, our first speaker is a great psychiatrist, world-renowned psychiatrist, and a researcher at the National Institutes of Mental Health for 20 years. And he was the first to describe what's called seasonal affective disorder, SAD. And his new book, and you're all getting a copy of it, called Transcendence, Healing and Transformation Through Transcendental Meditation, just found out that in the June 19th edition of the New York Times is number 7 on the New York Times bestseller list. Dr. Rosenthal practices here in Bethesda. So really, without further ado, I'd like to ask Norman, hope you don't mind, Norman, that you come and tell us about the meditation, about your journey, how you wrote this book. Please welcome Dr. Norman Rosenthal.
Good evening, everybody. I must tell you, it's a little bit surprising for me to be here talking to you all about meditation. About 5 years ago, I would never have predicted or anticipated that I would be doing so. Because for many years, I have practiced psychiatry, I have researched, and haven't really given much thought to meditation at all. Now, I'm always very interested in what my patients tell me. I listen, I'm really fascinated. It's one of my great joys is I love my work. But every now and then, somebody says something that just fires my researcher's imagination. And I think to myself, you know, I really have to find out more about this. And that happened to me some years ago when I was back at the NIMH. And somebody told me about regular mood changes that occurred with the seasons, when the days got short and dark. And the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle came together, And along with our team there, some of whom are even here this evening, we put together the puzzle of seasonal affective disorder and the novel treatment of light therapy, which at that time, I can tell you, people thought was pretty wacky, but which has since become a mainstream treatment. Now, a similar thing happened to me about 5 or 6 years ago when a young man with bipolar